We're here today with Deborah Nelson Linck. Deborah is a lifelong Episcopalian and retired elementary educator. A member of Christ Church Cathedral in St. Louis for 50 years, she chaired the search committee for the 11th Bishop of the Diocese of Eastern Missouri. She continues to educate learning communities about the importance of Black history as the founder and curator of the Hands-On Black History Museum. Deborah lives in St. Louis, Missouri, and her new book is titled Pauli, Shouting for the Rights of All People. You can learn more about the book at Morehouse Publishing. So, Deborah, thanks so much for joining us, and congratulations on the new book.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
So before we get into the book, maybe you could tell us a little bit more about your background and about the museum that I mentioned.
So the museum, which is kind of coming to an end, unfortunately, was a passion for the last 15 years. And I started it when I was teaching elementary school. The learning community where I worked was not very diverse in their curriculum. So there was little mention of Black history things in the curriculum. So I started working with some other teachers, and we would set up displays for kids to learn a little bit about African American history. So the older elementary students automatically did posters about a famous African American. They set them out in the hallway. After they fell down off the walls, the teachers sent them home. And that was just not the most efficient way, I thought, to use those posters. So we used their posters, books from the library, and our own artifacts to create what felt like a museum experience for the kids. Pardon me. So they would set up in the cafeteria, and they'd have a poster, and then they'd have a book that the older students could read to younger students. And for example, we did George Washington Carver. So there would be a book about George Washington Carver, and then there would be peanuts there before peanut allergies, a little bit before serious peanut allergies, but so that the kids could touch real peanuts. They could take some home and plant them. They could, that would be their hands-on experience with George Washington Carver, so that they remembered him not only from a story that they had heard, but from using the peanuts and using the thing. So that started out as a small thing with just a couple of classrooms. And then I continued to collect, which is my addiction. And so I got any kind of artifacts that I could find. And I finally started setting up an exhibit in our school gymnasium. So there were different areas for the kids to explore and learn about African Americans. And the first museum was set up for a couple of days. The next, over a couple of years, it was set up for the whole month. And I would train the teachers how to use the museum with their classrooms. And so we'd have 450, 500 students come through the museum every year. And then I started bringing in guest speakers, and then I expanded it to my church and setting up exhibits at church and bringing in guest speakers at church. And so it was this big, giant thing. And then it evolved into me doing conferences or working with teachers on how to make their classrooms more diverse. And so I would use some of those same materials and teach the teachers how to create those materials for their classroom, rather than me go to every school system in the St. Louis area. It was like, here's how you can do this. Here's how you start this. And so it just grew into this wonderful project of learning communities, learning more about African Americans.
Well, that sounds very cool.
And at a very young age, kindergarten through fifth grade.
Well, that's important.
So it was wonderful. It was a lot of fun.
Good. So let's talk about the new book. As I mentioned, the title is Pauli, Shouting for the Rights of All People. What motivated you to write that?
So I had actually written another book about Absalom Jones, who was the first Black preacher in the Episcopal Church. And church publishing approached me and said, we have a book on Absalom Jones already, but if you have another book that you're interested in writing, let us know. And so I was kind of heartbroken, and I was like, okay, this is how this goes. So this was not meant to be. And a couple of months later, Church Publishing called and they said, would you like to have a conversation about writing a book about Pauli Murray?
Hmm.
And I said, I so much would like to have that conversation. They said, do you know who that is? I was like, absolutely. So nerd teacher that I am, I ordered a bunch of books on Pauli Murray because I knew a little bit about her, but not an extensive amount. And I went through the books and kind of formulated some ideas on how I might write this book and what it might look like for kids and what they would get from reading the book. And they gave me the grade level to write toward. And I tried to create a story that had a lot of takeaways from my experiences with the Black History Museum, actually.
So for people who are not familiar with Pauli Murray, can you kind of give a brief overview of her life? She was just an amazing person.
She was an amazing person. So Pauli Murray grew up in 1910. She was born in 1910. So that just seems like that was so long ago, and it was more than 100 years ago now. And she grew up and had a really difficult life starting out, in that her mother died when she was very young. Then her father was killed several years later, and she went to live with her grandparents and her aunt to be raised by them, with the rest of the children in the family being sent to another relative, at a distance from them. And so the family was kind of split apart, but being raised by family. So she started out that way, but she was a really bright, smart person that was, even from a very young age, was very just driven. And the book talks about how she almost had hands laid on her at a very young age. And Bishop Delaney, a Black bishop, said to her, "You're a child of destiny." And she grew into that. She had a faithful center. So that was big in their life, that church going was a thing that they did and was a part of who they were. Grew up with an aunt who indulged her and believed in her and loved her unconditionally, which was a big, huge part of their life. And who isn't fortunate enough to have that? That's a big thing to have. She graduated at the top of her class, decided, I'm done with segregation. I don't want to be a part of this anymore. I'm going to New York, and I'm going to school at Columbia. She goes to New York with her aunt to kind of scope out the school and everything, and finds out that Columbia does not take women. And then she goes to another college, and they don't have enough money. And they say, you can go to the state school here, Hunter College, but you don't have enough credits. And at that time, a lot of Black schools only went through grade 11. So then students did not have enough credits to go to college, even if you aspired to go to college. And here she was, the smartest in her class, graduating with honors with not enough credits to start college. So they said, you can enroll in high school here, but it'll take you another 2 years.
Wow.
Well, at that age, she was only 15 at the time. So she enrolls in the school, and she finishes in 1 year. And to show them, she goes back home to work for a year to get some money. And then she goes back and she starts Hunter College. And that starts her time on the East Coast and, in New York and everything. So she goes from there to law school, to several law degrees, to, civil rights activist. She wants to be a writer when she's in school initially. And so she writes, and she's into civil rights, and she's into women's rights. And she's one of the founders of NOW, and National Organization for Women. And towards the end of her life, when most of us are winding down in our 60s, she decides, I'm ready to do something else with my life. What is going to be the meaning for the rest of my life? And she decides to go to seminary. And she, at age 63, I believe, she starts seminary. And she comes out and she becomes an Episcopal priest. And she is in one of the first graduating classes of women who become priests in the Episcopal Church, that are ordained in the Episcopal Church. And the other struggle that she has along the way is she is gender questioning at the time, and that was not a thing back then. You were, but it was not a discussion. It was not a label. It was not you were other than. Mm-hmm. So that was something that she struggled with also for a long time, and I think she made her peace with that. But so she had all these obstacles of segregation, of her gender questioning, of her, how the world was looking at Black folks. And in spite of all that, she had these magnificent accomplishments. And so she's such a hero.
Yeah, no, I'm really glad, your book, and there's another book that I recently interviewed some folks about, Pauli Murray too. So I'm really glad that people are raising her up, and building awareness about who she was and what she did, because as we said, she was just an amazing person.
Yes.
So now the age level for your book is what?
It's grades 3 through 5. So that would be about 7 through 12 years old. So the interesting thing that I liked about writing the book is, from working as an elementary educator, kids get things on different levels. So when you introduce this book to kids who are very young, their takeaway is, this is her name, this is what she did, this is when she lived, this is what her contribution was. And that's basically their takeaway. And for a lot of kids, mostly, this is her name, this is what she looked like. Then kids on a different level will get, wow, she was in civil rights. I know civil rights from Rosa Parks. I know civil rights from Martin Luther King. I know civil rights from Malcolm X. I know, that whole thing. And so they are starting to make some connections, especially if the school program has that rich curriculum where the kids are learning about those African Americans as they're coming up and those periods that they're studying. And then kids are even a little bit older at the end of it, the 12-year-olds. They're starting to see the social issues in the book and all of the things. This is her, and oh my gosh, she was a non-binary person. Well, how did this work back then? What did this look like? And so they have different questions, and they're taking in different information about the book. And, just they have their own questions about who Pauli Murray was, and their takeaway is very different. And so I like that it can, help kids on all of those levels. And for kids, again, who are the really, really bright students, is like, I want to know more about her. So they'll do more research beyond my book. Mm-hmm. And that was one of the interesting things, that I had a friend that read the book, and she said, I learned so much. That was a kid's book, but I learned so much from that book. And I looked her up online, and she was just fascinating. And I was like, that's exactly what I wanted to do, is I want people to learn more about her.
Wow. So how long is the book for that age range?
So the book is 62 pages long, but it's written in these teeny tiny kind of little chapters that you can digest really easily. So a page and a half is a chapter, and it might be 2 or 3 pages as a chapter, so that you can get through it. It's not a read aloud per se, unless you were doing the kind of read aloud where I'm going to read these chapters today, and then tomorrow we'll pick up from there. If you're doing that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. For very, very young kids, 6, 7-year-old, not just a book that you're going to flip through with a lot of illustrations, with a lot of discussion, things back and forth, but can be used in a lot of different ways. So Yes, it's a nice little weight book to have in your hands.
What did you enjoy the most about putting the book together?
I love research. I love research. I love learning about a new person. And I want that enthusiasm to come out to people I'm sharing the book with. And so the research part was really, really like fun to me. So I told you, total nerd. Reading the books, I listened to A Song in a Weary Throat, and I got the audio version of it. And so I took my book and I read along with the audio version and took notes in the book while I'm listening to it. And then I listened to it a second time. And then there was a 6-hour oral interview that I found online that she had done. And so that was really exciting to hear her actual voice and to try to figure out how to translate her voice into what I was sharing with kids. And so I listened to that and took notes. But that was a pretty thrilling part, was just to do the research on it, and then to take that and make all those big people words into words that a younger audience would understand.
Well, it had to be really cool that you found those audio tapes.
That was so exciting. I'm so excited for that.
Yeah, I can imagine. Wow. So was there anything in particular that surprised you as you were developing the book?
That I guess that she was so driven. She was very much, and I've not found this anywhere, and I'm by no means making a diagnosis. She was very much a spectrum kind of person in that she wouldn't let things go. She had this tunnel vision for things that she was working on or that she was passionate about, and she just would not let them go. And so very much like kids that I've worked with that are somewhere on the autism spectrum, and nobody calls that out. They say all kinds of other things about her, but nobody ever says that. And I suspected that may have been part of her personality in the way that she went about things. She always was like unfiltered and kind of spoke her mind, and that's a thing, for people. But she just was always like, nope, I mean this, and this is the only thing I meant, and she would just kind of go at it and just keep at it. And so I was like, wow, that you weren't even a meek person or that humble during that time to try to navigate your way through all these obstacles, but you were just straightforward. And she was small in stature. So she had a larger than life personality. And I actually talked to a woman that was the secretary at St. Mark's, where she attended church. And she knew just a little bit about Pauli Murray from, some small interactions with her. And she said she always stood up nice and tall, and which was what my mom used to call a big attitude. She said she just had this larger than life. She said she was no nonsense. And she said she was just this a force of nature kind of person is what we call it. And that was very evident. But I thought, wow, that's really that's really cool that you could be that kind of person. Back then, that a lot of times we think about African Americans in history and what kind of person they had to be to navigate the world at that time. Did you have to be a little quiet? Did you have to pull back? Did you have to, be a little, less of yourself? And she was not. And she didn't apologize for it. I love that about a woman that's not apologetic.
Well, she was so brilliant, obviously,
Yes.
For all the things that she accomplished. So, when you're brilliant and you're driven, that's quite a combination.
That makes you a force of nature.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. So What would be the one thing that you'd like for your readers to take away from the book?
I want them to learn about this new person that they may not have heard of before. One of the things when I work with teachers and I'm telling them about how to make their classrooms more diverse and materials to bring in their classrooms, I say, if every year you talk about Martin Luther King and Harriet Tubman and, same people, the kids are not really learning. They're repeating stuff from kindergarten, from second grade, from fourth grade, from whatever. And you have to introduce new names to children and new personalities. And then history becomes a puzzle. And all of these people are connected in so many ways. When you start looking at Pauli Murray's story, and this is a new person that you're introduced to, all of a sudden, there she is in history, and there's Thurgood Marshall, and there's Langston Hughes, and there's James Baldwin, and there's, there's Eleanor Roosevelt. So it's like that connectedness of all of us in history is such an amazing thing. But you can't do that if you're learning about the same person over and over again.
Absolutely. No, that makes a ton of sense. Well,
so my big takeaway is learn her name, know her story, and then start learning about all the people she was connected to.
Well, as you know, a lot of our audience are writers. So what suggestions do you have for writers looking to do something similar to this?
Just start. I mean, it took somebody calling me. I've been writing stuff since I was in 8th grade. I wrote a script for a school play that they broadcast over the school radio station. And so the bug hit me a long time ago. And for 9/11, I wrote a book that I passed out. I self-published and passed it out to lots and lots of kids all across the United States that kind of helped them with healing. And to think that you will never be an author is so self-defeating. And I'm an old retired lady, and I got to write a book that was published, and that's so exciting.
Sure.
So don't give up, and just keep at it. Keep at it, and if it's what you want to do, keep writing.
Good for you. Well, it's just fantastic that you've been able to accomplish that, Deborah. So again, the title of the book is Pauli Murray, Shouting for the Rights of All People. You can learn more about it at Morehouse Publishing. Deborah, thanks again for all your work and for sharing it with us today.
Thank you so much.